Good old boys.
I'm Mark.
Bog beef.
Fredo.
Still got it?
You know we do.
Let's get that money. I know Duder's got it. That was a great, great song.
Oh, is that his?
Yep,
Yeah.
Clear My Head, his newest.
I was going to say that. I thought that was, if I had to guess, I was going to think it was from an 80s movie.
Yeah.
I mean that is a compliment, not a, I love
We
you.
know when you say that, you mean it as a compliment, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what everybody said in the chat, and I think that's what he was going for, especially you look at the artwork. So it sounded like Blade Runner, etc. Fantastic track, Duder.
The perfect thing that would be for would be, imagine like a noir movie set in the 50s but made in the 80s. That's what that would be the perfect soundtrack for.
Absolutely. That's my jam. So all right. Tonight's going to be serious in more ways than one. So I know we're probably going to have a little bit more listeners than usual. We're on we're streaming multiple sources tonight. Everybody's looking forward tonight. If you're not listening live, you'll be listening on the Patreon feed. WBS Apparel in the chat. We've inked the deal. We'll have merch very, very soon. WBSapparel.com, White Boy Summer. Check them out. Not only great t-shirts, not only funny t-shirts, funny patches, very funny guys, white pill guys, and high quality stuff. They got that. I don't know what you call it. I don't know. Sorry, I don't want to say what's available right now, but some of the promos. Yeah, they got it. They got the Cryptech orange Happy Hunter hat. That'll be a good look here. I don't know if hunting season is right around the corner, and I am ready. I could be ready with my White Boy Summer hunting camo. Have it on next to that big old 12-point buck coming my way in about a month.
Let me ask you this: how much Real Tree apparel do you own?
Fair amount. I like Real Tree. I never really was that into Real Tree until I saw the way Stone Cold Steve Austin rocked it. He was the one that for me put the now there's like 20 different kinds of Real Tree, but like I just remember him having the classic Real Tree with the oversized hoodie, with the gold chain. I was like, that is a really good look for Redneck. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, Real Tree now just makes like regular clothes. You can go get.
You can buy a freaking car that's Real Tree and stuff.
Back in the day, people used to get cans of spray paint and paint an old Jeep camouflage. Now you can just you can get one custom made, I guess. I saw somebody wearing a Real Tree polo shirt. That's pretty wild. Not camouflage, just like a regular old polo shirt that was Real Tree.
Yeah, they also got the Bass Bagger, the blue Real Tree it's for being out on the water. It looks really good, and it's the fish jack. It's a very funny shirt. I laughed my ass off. A funny hat. First time I saw it, it's it's a bass fish, but he's got a Wojak-ish mouth kind of thing. But yeah, White Boy Summer. Shout out to them.
I mean, so do we have any business before we get to the business that everybody's been talking about for the last like 4 days?
Like a week ago, I had a great idea, and I wrote a really funny monologue, and then the story happened, and I'm like, well, you forget that. The monologue takes like half an hour to actually get through, so forget that. We're just gonna throw that in trash. But I do want to start. By the way, we didn't talk about this beforehand. I don't know if you know, but I didn't know this till listening to people that are bigger time than us. But like Oron, from what I understand, I picked this up listening to him. Shout out to Oron. He's doing great things. Is Oron McIntyre. Check him out, YouTube. working for the Blaze, who are, you know, by the way, it's no small thing that Oron is out there saying what needs to be said, and the Blaze is backing him up. That's not something that happened 3 or 4 years ago.
No, no, it's not. I mean, you can see the movement. Like, I'm not really a fan of him, but Ben Shapiro has moved. And who's the other guy? Oh shoot.
Well, Trump
Charlie
moved.
Kirk. Yeah.
Oh, Charlie Kirk definitely moved.
Yeah, these people were not. They were pretty basic neocon young guys on the internet. And I mean, they're not. They probably still are, but they had to change their language. They had to change what they profess to believe in public.
Well, you know what that is. I mean, what it is.
It's adapt or die.
These guys, I mean, and it's so, I don't know if you can believe this or not. A lot of people don't believe this. I don't really, I kind of wish people did. I kind of wish people believe I do wish people believe the, what's not true. Like, I've never had, I've never been in any kind of situation. I mean, honestly, I can't imagine, but where I'm like offered money for a certain opinion or something like that. Or especially like, you know, something super specific. Basically, you know, the political people, politics, because you in mass politics, because people vote on stuff, there's a huge amount of bullshit. That's kind of what we're going to be talking about tonight. There's tons of people that just, you know, they say what their donors tell them to. And, you know, it's not exactly like, you know, it gets into anyways, that just happens a lot. I've never been in that position. I like women to believe that I am in that position, that Peter Thiel cuts us checks. That would be awesome. Still it's a negotiation. I mean, there are people that I know are basically paid to, you know, monitor or to mess up the right wing or whatever. You know, you could think of David French can't hold that position anymore because he's, you know, he's out of that job. It's a negotiation. So even if you're like a secret agent working, you know, against the right, but you've got some media job or something, you still have to sort of negotiate with the times. And, you know, David French couldn't do that. So he's out. So he has no real ability to influence people on the right anymore. Sorry. So even guys who, you know, it's kind of like the old classic thing. And I tell people it's like politics is very, very complicated the way things interact. You know, there's a lot of different crazy theories that try to explain this. It's not something that you can just easily explain and hold in your hand. But like, this is the old, what do you call the Fed thing? Like, if you are the secret police and you send feds to infiltrate an institution because you don't like that institution, it's not immediately clear like if that is going to help them or hurt them. Because I mean, first off, if they're going to
sometimes people just go native for one thing.
Well, that's one possibility, but the other thing is they don't even have to. Like the one thing is if you send some guy to, and I've said this 1,000 times, so I won't say it a long time. If you send these like super secret agents to monitor these people, and they don't do anything illegal, you just added like some like, you know, badass ex-Navy SEAL to their ranks, and he can't really he's still going to go to the meetings and all this kind of stuff, and fill out the ranks and look good in the pictures. If they don't do anything illegal or you know, he doesn't have anything to report. So I don't know. Politics is always like this. And of course, classic example, Adolf Hitler was supposed to just spy on the Nazis. He was a Fed. He was a secret agent working for the legit, like, I don't know if he was working for the legitimate government or one of these like veterans groups or whatever.
I don't know. I'm not down with my Hitler lore like Malcolm is. You have to ask him.
I'm pretty sure he was just working for the government, and he was out of his job as a spy or whatever. I mean, it went from, you know, one of these, you He was a runner in the military, which that's not exactly a spy, but you're sort of working on your own. You know what I mean?
Being a runner in World War One was very dangerous.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Anyways, okay. So here's the deal. Here's the deal about tonight. And so I want to offer something that there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to hear in the next. Who knows how long this is going to be? Now, for one thing, I'm old enough that I've been here before. I've been here before. I remember this was what, 2006.
Oh man, it was one in like 2000. Wasn't there one in like 2002 or 2001? You know, there was like, there's been like 4 of these little wars in the last 20 years.
They go, the guys, they do an attack, they run over to southern Lebanon. I don't want to give the spoilers, all this kind of stuff, and the Hezbollah's there, and
yeah, but this, I mean,
we haven't got that far yet in this.
Okay,
one. We haven't got that far in this. Anyways, but we've been in this kind of situation here before. Okay, but here's the deal. So what can we offer you that's different? Well, so a lot of things. I get this a lot with the patronage stuff, which by the way, we do have to have time to cover, like probably the greatest patronage story in the news in the past, a couple of years or something. But so part of the deal with the patronage is that every now and then people be like, they'll listen to it, they're into it, and they're like, wait a minute, you're just sort of like restating like the most basic poli-sci 101 stuff. It's like, yeah. Now there's a reason I do that. Okay, here's the deal. Like, and you can believe this or not. This is absolutely true. And like, you might not believe this because if any other person told you this, you would say that's, I don't really believe that. That's not what an ordinary person is like. You may have figured out by now, I'm not an ordinary person. I'm kind of nuts. Would you agree with that, Merrick?
Yeah. I've been saying that for years.
Yeah, I'm kind of nuts. I'm kind of out there. And so I kind of get off on these wild things. And so one of the wild things, there's this thing that sort of bothered me for a long time. You ever hear this? And it's not untrue. People will say something like this: you can learn more about how people think by becoming like a great movie critic or reading great fiction books than you can read great nonfiction. Part of it is because the human brain just understands these stories, these beautiful little stories, better than it understands anything else. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, if I was going to take there's pros and cons to this argument. If I take the pro side would be when you read nonfiction, when you read a history book, you were reading the propaganda of the people who won whatever happened between those 2 periods of time. When you look at their fiction, you can do this forensic evaluation of it. You can say, well, why are they saying this? Why are they pushing this? Like if you take I like 20th century movies, pretty much all of them between let's say the 50s and up until the 2000s. You can tell exactly what the people making that film believe and what they're trying to make other people believe just by watching them.
Yeah, but you are cheating, right? So what I'm talking about,
sure.
Like there are people you can get like really smart about like the world by studying Shakespeare really hard and stuff like that. And just the way that the interactions and the love story and all this stuff, because and that's not wrong. However, there's another side to that, and the other side to that is that the human mind. It's not really. It's not this thing that you might that Neil deGrasse Tyson or these kinds of things sort of purported to be. The human brain more easily traffics in bullshit, especially with a good story, than anything else. I mean, like if you really, the really basic truths are very difficult to keep like centered in your brain. We talk the classic example from sports is the triangle. We talked about this before, so I'm not gonna beat it again, but like if you think about we got it like the triangle, there's this crazy geometric shape and there's there's this big book and you got to understand all the ins and the outs. It's just this dumb trick to try to force you to think, oh, well, the best thing in the world you can possibly do in basketball is just pass the ball a lot instead of dribbling and driving. So you should always pass the ball. So it's just a stupid trick to try to keep your mind where pointed at this one simple great truth, which is very hard for us. By the way, I don't know exactly why. I mean, I'm not that smart. I haven't gotten that far down it. It's not really all that important. I think boredom is one thing. I think there's kind of this stuff we talk about a lot with like things like addiction and stuff where like your brain is not always on your team. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, that's
optimizing for a different thing than you want it to be optimizing for.
Oh, that's
you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
like it's on your team. It's just not like it's not on the same playbook, if that makes sense.
That's a great point. But like someone who's a heroin addict, their brain's like, hey buddy, you need to go get another shot of that heroin. It'd be awesome. So yeah. Okay, so why am I saying all this? What I'm saying is I'm not talking down to you. By the way, I'm talking down to me. This is the only way I can ever sort of keep things straight in my brain, is just to hammer the basic points in my head over and over again, because I want to get off in the la la land and start telling myself fun stories and all this bullshit instead of the truth. The other thing is it's usually not fun to talk about like hardcore truth. Now, there's more layers to this, but let's start out. There's this thing, a lot of people don't know this because of the way that the U.S. military has professionalized. Back in the day, everybody's grandpa was in the Korean War or the World War II and all this stuff. So people were just around people that were in the military. You've ever seen Beavis and Butthead, or I think what was the later on show he did with in Texas?
King of the Hill.
King of the Hill. I think this basically becomes, that was Mr. Anderson on Beavis and Butthead. I don't know what's his name is
same voice, Hank Hill. Yeah,
Hank Hill, right? And I saw an interview and he was like, well, who is that guy? And then he's like, well, that's every single guy above a certain age growing up in the South. That's all of them. And you know why they all like the same way? Because they were all in the service. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess that was a little bit like, we're too young to remember that they were all really old by the time we were old enough to like understand people, Yeah, but that's true.
Well, but Vietnam vets weren't though, Merrick, right? I mean, like I remember when you and I were in elementary school, all the guys that are our age now were Vietnam vets. I mean, I guess less Vietnam vets than like, say, the generation before.
Yeah,
it was really everybody that was in the World War II or something.
Yeah,
but
like
there
World
were a
War
lot
II,
of Vietnam vets.
There were, but you think like World War II in Korea, they're like, if you were Mike Judge's age, who's older than us by a decade or more probably. Like, he can remember a time when basically every adult man who wasn't 4F probably saw some kind of service,
I mean, that's a fair point. I'm probably kind of biased too, because my first boss was a World War II vet. So like, I was always around it. You know what I mean? Just because like, this is the guy that I worked with every day and told me what to do every day. And we'd be like, doing very mundane things. And he'd be like, oh, it's at 3:00. Like, you know what I mean? Because he was a fighter pilot over the Pacific.
Yeah. By the way, just to toot my own horn, I got into an argument with Peter Zehan the other day on Twitter, and everybody told me I was right, and then eventually he agreed I was right, and he said, "Well, it was just a technical misunderstanding."
Yeah, he's one of those guys you were talking about earlier, which is his job is he's a smart guy, and his job is to just believe ridiculous stuff and say it out loud and like present it in a way that sounds semi-intelligent.
Yeah, but anyways, and what we were talking about was some of this stuff, but here's the part of this stuff where he was talking about the military being very this thing that produces all this liberal culture. I was like, You mean the only part of the government is like 90% men, where like liberal values like literally can't exist in many of these environments? For example, like why are all those old guys, why are they all the same guy? Well, because that's part of the military experience. So that, like, if you ever see boot camp, that, like, the point of boot camp is to destroy your individuality. That's not a problem or a conspiracy theory. That's a life or death necessity in the military. You have to, anyways. But sorry, but one of the things that comes with this military culture, one of these things that sort of goes with this stuff, is you have to be truthful and direct all the time. You can't say like like the kind of thing that it's not a good idea to do this all the time in your regular life. If your wife asks if her ass looks big in those jeans, you say no. In the military world, you have to say yes.
You might want to update that analogy for the 21st century, buddy.
Well, that's going to hurt the military, by the way. But the reason is that in life or death situations, when people are shooting back at you and stuff, you can't put that layer in front of things that you say. You just have to be super honest all the time, no matter if you're talking to the guy above you or whatever. You have to be like, this happens in the military all the time. Hey, you're getting fat. You need to eat less, chunky.
By the way, I just Googled it because I was curious. The question you asked, I didn't. Since we're live, whatever. I didn't have time to go into it deep, but it could be as many of the men who were in that age range, like a quarter of those men were in the military during World War II. A quarter of the men who were eligible for service, which is a pretty big chunk of the male population. That's a ridiculous, something like 12, it says 12% of the entire population was in the military in World War II. That's including men and women.
Right. And by the way, yeah, it's illegitimate scholar. I know he was in the Marine Corps Semper Fi. Thank you for your service. We're going to talk about why we say things like that in this episode. Because I know that sounds crazy if you're a Zoomer. You're like, why would you do that? That's silly. It's more dangerous to drive a van or something, to drive a bus for the city, blah, blah, blah. We're going to talk about that. But of course, this doesn't mean people that join the military have no individuality. How, like, during that boot camp, and he was in the Corps, so I know the Marine Corps boot camp is one of the roughest boot camps there is in the world. During that, and by the way, you always have to, there's always this sort of distance you have to keep between it and yourself. This is kind of what the beginning of, there's a great Zizek lecturer Zizek was this very successful in the military. He had a decent career in a military setting. He knows what the military is like. In the only person who sort of copes with Marine Corps Basic in, what was that movie with the Marine Corps Basic in it?
Full Metal Jacket?
Full Metal Jacket is Joker, because he keeps this ironic distance to it, right?
Yeah.
He's doing it, but he has to joke and all this kind of stuff. That's totally normal. That's how you deal with it, etc. It sort of puts these things in the back of your head in case we actually went to wartime, blah, blah, blah. Anyways. Okay, you got to be honest and truthful, blah, blah, blah. So we set up two things. So I'm going to be honest and truthful with people tonight and talk about really basic stuff. Which, by the way, you don't have to listen to this. I don't mean this in an offensive way.
No, he's wrong. You do have to listen to this.
No, here's the thing. Which, by the way, we're going to talk about tonight. This whole time, we're talking about like what could happen to the Palestinians, what could happen to the Jews. Like 2 weeks ago, basically, I didn't hear about this anywhere except for on Argent Templar's channel. 150,000 people were successfully ethnically cleansed out of their region they've occupied for thousands of years. They signed the paperwork. They said they'll be out of there forever by January 1st, 2024.
Put an asterisk by thousands of years, because that region, that's been roiling around since the Russian Empire days. I don't know if it's that long, but yeah, since at least the end of the Cold War, they've been there.
But they're gone.
Yeah, there was a war between, like, there was a war back in what, 2020, 21, whatever, between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan won, and the war was kind of over this enclave within Azerbaijan that was full of Armenians, and they the prime minister of Armenia basically said, "You guys are on your own," and that, like, their little enclave is gone now, or I guess exclave, whatever.
Right.
However, yeah.
Well, we'll cover that. But however, that's great that you said that, because here's the deal. So, by the way, how many people listening knew that? I would imagine very few. I didn't know about it. And you know, the world isn't worse off because you didn't know that. You probably weren't going to do anything about it anyways. There's nothing wrong with that. There's all kinds of bad things going on in your life. You know, there's going on in the world. If there's, you know, you should be way better off worrying about people in your family, your own country, blah, blah, blah. In other words, you have no duty to tune in to all the bad things that are going on in the world. However, you're still here and you want to hear about bad things in the world. So we're going to talk about it. So this is going to be along the lines of this is the thing. It's not fun to hear, like, so here's some facts that you may not want to consider. Having money is awesome. Life is easier if you look good. Paris, France is full of garbage. Rome is full of pickpockets and thieves. Getting shot with a gun sucks. You know, these are all if you have that extra slice of pie, you will get fat. And yes, you probably need to buy a new belt. These are all things that you basically know are true. And I'm not your boss. I'm not your parole officer. You don't have to hear this kind of S from me. Okay, so don't take any hard feelings. However, let's get started. We talked about those people getting ethnically cleansed like a couple days ago. You immediately went to a subject that's 3 letters long and it starts with W. You immediately start talking about wars. Mm-hmm. I saw a lot of brain dead commentary all week about why Israel exists. This is like, I'm not saying military people are the smartest people in the world, but you will notice that anybody that had like a long career in the military, especially officers and stuff, whenever this subject comes up of things like Israel and Palestine, they always go right to the things that matter. And I know, like, why would that be? Are they just smarter than everyone else? Well, the military is and wars. Well, we'll put it there like this. Why does Israel exist? Because they have an army and because they've won wars. If you want Israel to not exist, the only thing that will kick them out and put the Palestinians back or whatever will be if they lose wars with their army. Yeah, I saw this great commentary, but some guy who is like a professional warrior, professional fighter, though. He fights people in the sport. In other words, he doesn't know anything about stuff like this. So he said, why don't the Jews just go to Madagascar? You know, why don't they just go there instead? Well, guess what? You can look up Madagascar. You can look up any piece of dirt on the ground that someone claims. In other words, like, I think you could go to the only places that Jews could go without this being true would be like Antarctica or something. Good luck. But if you go to Madagascar, there's a freaking army that has guys with uniforms. It's all 18 to 25-year-old males with machine guns that would kill you if you tried to take Madagascar. This is true for every square inch of dirt on this earth.
Can I interject here with a little helpful tip? And it's not specifically about this, but it's like a general thing. You know, we've talked about this with Malcolm before. He likes to use the Canary Islands with the Tenerife air disaster, where there's 2 jumbo jets crashed into each other. One was taking off and one was landing. And like, one of the reasons why was when they would talk to like the dispatchers, they would say, "Okay, I'm ready to take off." And after this, they decided we shouldn't do that. The only time you should say take off is when you are telling somebody you should take off. This is a like this word, when you hear it, it will trigger associations and you will know things are shaking, right? It's a loaded word. Whenever you're talking about this, if you want to avoid the eye of Sauron, aka Mr. Bezos and YouTube and whatever, you say Jewish people. Just try that instead of the other thing.
Okay.
It means the same. Now, this is not like for you specifically, but like whenever you talk about this with somebody, and like people have been talking about this crap nonstop.
Well, by the way, you can't really say that for this because there are Jewish people who don't give an ass about Israel.
Right. So like, why would you say, well, yeah, why? Yeah, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Now, plenty. Like, by the way, real talk. I mean, I've talked to plenty of them that have never been there. Maybe they went to what's that tour you go on to? Birthright, when you go to college.
Birthright.
Yeah.
That's a really good idea, by the way. That's like a really clever thing that they did.
Yeah, they go get you loaded, get you laid over there, and yeah. So, okay, well, there's a lot of them where the deal is like this. These are usually people that got a bit of doomer in them, and they're like, well, I don't really care about Israel, but like, if this place falls apart, at least I got somewhere to go.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, no, well, yes, that's true. But like, I think what happens with that, and we've talked about this in the past. You remember when we were younger men, and we were around the age where people who were in college were going on Birthright. I think you knew one who went on Birthright, and like, it changes their perspective because if you're American and you're our age, you've never been allowed to like. You couldn't get good boy points and be nationalist. That being nationalist was always bad. You go there and you get a big hit of like raw nationalism. And by the way, Americans are enjoying that right now, which is always part of when the Israel Palestine stuff pops up. It's vicariously enjoying being ultra nationalist by people who are too chicken shit to be ultra nationalist for their own country.
Yes. Now that's a huge part of it. Part of this is that all that stuff we talked about with the wars and armies, like if you're Canadian, you're sitting around thinking like, well, that doesn't mean like, who cares about that? We don't have, this powerful army or something. All the stuff that Israelis do, you guys did that one time. You have great grandpas that went and settled somewhere and fought the Indians, and they joined the army and they shot people, and that's why you have a country. So, like, by the way, nations isn't the only real model for how the earth works, but it's how it works now, and there's reasons why it's a pretty popular game. It's part of it. It's kind of a game. It's a way that the world has decided things will work, and the way the world decided is there's this game. If you got an army, because really, really serious things are settled by armies. A lot of things aren't settled by armies. People say, well, just use the, what do they say? The sanctions and stuff like that. Well, sanctions only go so far. If you have a serious issue, like, hey, people with your religion shouldn't live there anymore, well, you're going to need an army. That's what armies are for. And all these countries, they got armies. Now, the thing is, all of you guys forgot that about your country. You don't remember that stuff because your countries are older than the people who died. This country isn't. This country popped off. All the George Washington of Israel is like all these people. All this stuff happened in the freaking 70s. It was 70s, late 60s.
Well, I mean, 1948, right? But
okay,
yeah.
I always think of the was the 7-Day War.
Right. You could say it started in 48 and 67 is really when things solidified to something that we'd recognize today.
Well, the 7-Day War, people said, well, hey, this bullshit is out. We're going to kick you guys out. You have to fight a war to keep what you got.
Yeah. And by the way, it's not just that, it is partially that these countries become rich and old, and that always happens. But there's also been a concerted effort to make people not think about these things and discourage them from thinking about them, because if you did, you'd get really mad at the people who like actually run your country. There are still places that are pretty old that do still have these, they still have patriotism and respect for the military, for military service and stuff like that. That's not necessary. It's not the way we view it here is not necessarily all the cycle of history. Part of it is it's planned,
Right. Yeah. So Viral Load brings up Rhodesia in South Africa. They had armies, good armies. They had good armies, but I mean, they didn't they were facing like essentially unlimited armies with unlimited backing, which, the resources is a huge part of it. Now, obviously, I mean, think about the reason that I'm an American and not a Confederate, which, by the way, it's because we lost the war. We lost the war. That's the reason. If we'd won the war, we'd be Confederates. There's nothing else to it. Now, by the way, I mean, you talk about Rhodesia, talk about being the Confederacy, talking about, the North had like unlimited amount of Irish guys to throw in uniforms, and all this stuff. We had Stonewall Jackson. Who'd they have? We had Stonewall Jackson. Doesn't matter. So yeah. Anyways, okay. So that's the thing about the war stuff and the armies and stuff. They're really important, which, by the way, there's more reasons why these things get bottled up. Like it, so Netanyahu, was he a general?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So Netanyahu, this is what happens in countries, is that they always.
Well, his brother was. I think he was too. His brother definitely was.
Right. Well, like guys like George Washington, what happens to them is, he kind of stepped down gracefully, but if he didn't, what always happens is that when institutions mature, you have a different sort of archetype that finds ways to thrive. And part of that is finding ways to make the original aristocracy, which is aristocracies are military aristocracies, to sort of phase them out. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
That's something that happens. Like we talked about this. I talked about this regarding like, the Soviet Union and all these kinds of things. Like,
by the way, if George Washington hadn't just stepped aside, if he had declared himself dictator of America, probably would have worked out better in the end, actually.
Well, of course,
just throwing that out there. Because we always brag about him in that way, that like, he gave away all this incredible power, which is legitimately good. Like it takes a good man to do that, but maybe he shouldn't have done it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got people in the comments saying that he was a captain in the military. So that's a classic old aristocracy thing. Which
I think, by the way, most of their prime ministers so partially because in Israel, everyone's a veteran for the most part, right? Except for like some of the ultra Orthodox guys that are exempt from mandatory service. But I think like most of their prime ministers usually are veterans, right? Because I saw even when the reserves got activated this week, there were 1 or 2 former prime ministers that are out in the battlefield right now.
Right, but I would hold this to only officers. Like, even if you're
I gotta think they were all officers. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like Sergeant York was a better soldier than like 99% of people. However, I don't think he was. If he was an officer, that would have been like, they made him an officer at the end for a party or whatever. But he wasn't. He wouldn't be considered part of like the officers as part of like this kind of military aristocracy kind of thing. This is how countries work. These guys get in. They're awesome at starting country. It's kind of like Stalin isn't the kind of guys that start institutions. He's the kind of guys that finish them. You know what I'm saying? He's the kind of guys that take over. But yeah. So I mean, I just want to talk about that a little bit. That like there's a huge reality check that why do they have a country? It's because they have an army. And the army is pretty good and they win wars. Now, the other part of this is that, you know, as soon as you dig into this particular conflict, hopefully we can start off with, it's hilarious. This story moves just like all stories move so fast. Now, what's funny is if you do a weekly news show, you can never find an article that was like the original thing that happened, which I think in this case, if we do we have an article, by the way? Oh, we have the Wikipedia.
Well, okay. Well, you want to talk about the just the facts, ma'am, part of what happened, right? Is that what we're doing?
I just like to plant a flag at the first thing that happened. That's all.
Well, okay, that's pretty easy. The Hamas from the Gaza Strip invaded Israel on October 7th. Yeah, October 7th.
Right.
That's the meat of the story. They came across the border and attacked. Not just shooting rockets like they do all the time, not just like sporadic bombs or whatever. No, this was like an invasion force.
Right. Well, I mean, so they didn't plan on like holding ground, but they had a whole bunch of different guys doing all kinds of different things, sort of low tech guerrilla stuff, but like this sneaky surprise attack all at once, which immediately raises lots of questions. Like, before we even get anywhere in the story of like how this plays out, which, I mean, you know, there's the like the Leninist analysis of politics is like who benefits. I mean, how could you even possibly do that with this story? It's like, this is cut up like a million different ways who benefit.
Iran benefits. Wouldn't that kind of an obvious one?
Well, I mean, there's so many different, like, well, think about this. Netanyahu was about to like get trumped over his his judicial reform bills. No one's going to care about all that crap anymore.
Yeah, that was one of the early theories, right? I mean, one of the early, I'm not saying it's just true, but one of the early theories on this was like, okay, well, this is the most intelligence patrolled area in the world, arguably, right? And this was a coordinated attack that took like coordinated planning from probably thousands of people. You know, one of the things people said early on is like, there's no way that they couldn't have known about it. So it had to be something that, you know, Netanyahu let happen because it solved all his political problems for him. I don't think that that's true based on the brutality of the actual attack, but that was one of the early theories that went around.
This is something people do, and I've noticed this more and more as time goes on and things get worse. Not just in Israel, but pretty much everywhere in the West. That like, well, this must be part of some master plan, 12D chess master plan. It's not. It can't be just what it looks like, which is that they massively screwed up and didn't see this coming. Now, whatever they could have. I'm sure they did have some forewarning that there was like something planned, but you know that could mean shooting rockets. That could mean someone bombing a cafe or whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean 1,000 people pour across the border and attack the country guerrilla style. That was I'm guessing they didn't expect that. Because you don't. This is the thing about these. Like, if you're saying it's a false, somebody saying it's a false flag, or like the Pearl Harbor situation. The Pearl Harbor one is the best analogy because there have been accusations since basically Pearl Harbor happened that like Franklin Roosevelt knew that it was going to happen and he let it happen to get into the war. Like you don't let the Japanese Navy sink your entire fleet to get into the war. Like the Japanese Navy attacking your fleet is enough to get you in the war by itself. You don't need to let them sink everything. This is the thing. You don't need to let them. It could be 1,000 Israelis dead right now. That's probably not true because usually when these kind of situations happen, they overestimate how many people were killed. But there could be 1,000 dead Israelis. That's as many as like the first time this blew up in like 2001, 2000, whenever. that was like how many they lost in over the entire 4 year span of the back and forth low intensity war between the PLO and the IDF. That happened in like 3 days if you go by those numbers. I don't think you let that happen on purpose if you're in charge of a country. There's no way you cut it where you look good if that happened.
Right. So, I mean, I agree with that. However, that shows you, and I was just saying, like, how complicated, because, like, when you go to step one is, okay, there's an attack. All, like, from the jump, like, you've already got, like, grounds for, there's some people that are going to check out right there and be like, well, okay, step one, they did this secret attack. Well, Mossad is the best intelligence service in the world. They wouldn't have missed it. Therefore, and then you can go into anywhere you want to. I don't agree with that. However, I mean, that's how this works. That's what I was saying. I do throw out the whole, like, who benefits here, because that you would get twisted into 1,000 pretzels. Not okay. So you have Netanyahu looks good because of this. I mean, he doesn't look good because of this. However, he got out of some kind of trouble he was doing with the courts. The other big thing here, and I don't know if this is people have already, like, without even, like, getting any news on this, they just started posting this as news because people just expect this to happen. Well, okay, so there's another side to this. So obviously there's this two religions in that region of the world that have had problems through a long time. It's kind of like two and a half. I don't know. You have the Sunni and the Shia thing going on as well. And Israel was going to basically sign a deal with Saudi Arabia that would legitimize them in the eyes of one of the biggest, most powerful, richest Muslim countries in the world. That was going to happen. As soon as this popped off, I haven't heard anything. I haven't seen the official stuff canceling that deal. However, I mean, it's very quite likely that that deal may be off the table.
Yeah, I thought I actually did see an announcement that was done as a result of this. And that's there's a bigger point here too. And if Bogby, forgive me if I'm getting too far out ahead.
Go for it.
But there's something you'll see is like, well, why would they do this? Right. So, like, I've heard that, like, why would Hamas do this? They have to know, like, Israel is just more militarily powerful. The retribution is going to be far worse than whatever Hamas got away with in the early attack. Right. What you have to we have to remember is, like, the goal that they're operating under is not to, in the sense that you're talking about or we're thinking about, like, win a war against Israel. They would like to do that if they could, right? But I don't believe that they believe they have the ability to do that. The way they win in this situation is to make, for a Jewish person living in either Gaza and West Bank or even Israel more broadly, to make it stressful enough that when you have little kids, you're going to decide living in New York City is a better option, right? Like, that's really what I think the goal is here. And I'm not the first person that's had this idea. I've seen other people speak about this, and I don't remember names. So if you had this take on Twitter and I'm stealing it, I apologize. It's not intentional, but that's the most likely scenario, because there is no limit to Jewish immigration to Israel that the United States is going to put on, right? Realistically, that's unlimited. So the more people that, I mean, and that's a very frequent immigration path just generally, right? The more people that they can convince to do that, like, they say, like, yeah, I'm a committed Zionist, but at the end of the day, I got to put my family first, and this is just too dangerous. I don't want my kids growing up this way. And they move to the United States. I think that's the real goal. And they've got a chance over, these guys think over generations, right? Like, these are literally guys that are willing to just go die on suicide missions. So, like, if you have that kind of mindset where you're thinking 2-3 generations down the line, that's a strategy you're going to take,
Yeah. Which, by the way, I mean, you're talking about what Americans and all the people watching this are disconnected him of, imagine being in a war of civilizations that lasts for, 1,000 generations. The chessboard war lasts for, 1,000 generations. Like, wow, this really matters in a way that my shitty job doesn't, or you know what I mean, or what Nancy Pelosi said to that some idiot Republican. They're like, wow, this is a world where things really matter. Absolutely. By the way, I mean, the whole time I'm thinking in my heart, well, yeah, my great grandparents were thinking, we got to take Washington D.C. We just got to make the Yankees not reelect
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln. That was really all we had to do.
I had a little I had a little disagreement with Malcolm. Was it yesterday or today? Whatever. We were discussing, what the different strategies of these actors might be, and this is not quite the context it came up in, but I want to share this with you. So this is a population pyramid of Israel, and for a Western country, this is actually really good. You can see the shape of it. It looks like a pyramid. It's a little bit top heavier than you would like your pyramid to be. But like I said, by Western standards, this is a good pyramid. A lot of ours look like Christmas trees instead of this. Now, keep that in mind. And let me show you the Palestinians between the West Bank and Gaza combined. This is their population pyramid. This changes the way you think about any conflict. Because like when Fredo's talking about people who are thinking about the long term, well, in the long term, 30 years from now, maybe not even 30 years from now, there's going to be as many Palestinians as there are Israelis. It's not true right now. Right now, it's pretty much like 9 million Israelis and 5 million Palestinians. Well, if you're them, it's a waiting game for you. And this is a very old story. If you want a recent Western example, look at the relationship between France and Germany. France was on the decline population-wise throughout or let's say slower growth than Germany throughout the 19th century and early 20th century. And that led to a lot of problems when you have two rivals and one group is reproducing, and just having a young society makes you different in essence. Do you know what I mean? You have everything's different.
That, and also remember that the Palestinians effectively can't leave because there's no country that'll take them. Like Egypt won't even take them, right? Like they have no other options, right? Like other than to, I guess I don't want to say fight for their freedom, but you get what I'm kind of saying. Israelis can go basically to anywhere in Western Europe or the United States. They effectively have completely open immigration. So like they don't have their backs against the wall in that same way.
For people listening and not watching, let me help you out. The Israeli pyramid looks like a pyramid that's a little bit fatter on top than it should be, and the Palestinian pyramid looks like a Hershey's Kiss. If you've ever seen that. That's not a problem today, but that's a problem 20 years from now. And Fredo, what you just said was funny. I love quoting it, and mainly to continue to complain at Bogby for not watching it. In that great television show, Rome, Caesar has a line before the Battle of Pharsalus where he says like, our advantage is that we're hemmed in. We don't have anywhere to go. And his slave says, how is that an advantage? He goes, well, we have to fight or die. His guys have other choices. And that's true here, too. You don't want to be in that situation. You don't want to be pinned in the Gaza Strip with 2 million people and no power and no water. But they don't have anywhere to go. What are they going to do? It's either fight or perish. If those are the only two choices, it's not hard.
Right. And there's lots of countries nearby that'll give them guns.
Well, because they've been used that. Like but let's be honest about the relationship with these countries have. Like, if you cared about the Palestinians and you were Egypt and Jordan and all these surrounding countries that like have given money to the PLO in the past and say and give all their love and support today to Hamas. Like if you really love those people, you would have let them come and you would have evacuated them from Palestine years and years ago. But it's handy to have this group of people here in this country you don't like who will always cause them. Like, for example, now Iran, you know, the neocon boomers aren't wrong about this. Iran has a button they can push. And by the way, they probably did push it here because they don't want Saudi Arabia and Israel to make friends. Obviously they don't. These are two countries they hate. You don't want your enemies to come together. Like, isn't this one of the biggest criticisms every sane person has had with our foreign policy with regards to Russia? We don't want Russia and China to be friends. Well, Iran does not want Saudi Arabia and Israel to be friends. You hit this button and you force the Saudis to say, go on the record and say who you back in this fight. And that's exactly what happened, and it went as predictably as...
There's another point you made in there that kind of got glossed over by your second point, and that's, you know, these countries don't actually want to like accept the Palestinians as refugees. They just find them like a useful thing to use because they cause trouble, right, for someone they don't like. Really similar situation. They weren't nearly as effective in doing it, but the Soviet Union did that to the United States during the civil rights era, right? Like they weren't like offering, you know, like African Americans refugee status, but they were sort of happy to you know, stir the pot, so to speak, and try to cause civil unrest in the U.S.
Yeah, they weren't airlifting brothers out of Detroit, but they would take Paul Robeson to go on TV and say stuff about how the Soviet Union was great and the United States was evil because it mistreated black people. Yeah.
They gave a certain ex-Marine a 6-month vacation in Moscow. Which, I mean, you know, part of the Civil War strategy was getting the French to look at the Confederates like this. Hey, maybe if we give these rednecks some guns, they'll cause some problems for the Yankees.
Yeah, in the Indian tribes in the United States were that, but in you know, war between the French and the British, the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Civil War, every war until basically they were dispossessed completely. This is just how this is, if you're smart and you have the ability to do this kind of foreign policy, you do it. So I saw people calling that a conspiracy theory about Iran being involved in this. Well, if Iran's not involved in this, Iran is really bad at foreign policy. If they didn't have a hand in this, then they should fire their intelligence services.
Yeah, you can. That's funny. Woodpit says Oswald came back because he said it was too cold. I noticed that. I was looking at some crazy boomer bought a Hind D. You know, for
helicopter, a military helicopter.
Yeah, like a very, very serious military helicopter. There's nothing like it.
Like their version of the Comanche or Apache, right?
Well, no, we don't have anything like it. It's like an A-10 kind of.
Right.
It's super armored. Anyways, this boomer was given a tour of his Hind D, and every single piece of this thing, like everywhere he went and every single thing he pointed to, he you know, he would always say like, well, you know, this is exactly how it was used in Soviet Union, that's how, you know, these guys are autistic about that because it's the whole point of it. He said, well, like, what, you know, is this exactly how it came? You know, all this kind of stuff. And he's like, every single piece of it, he's like, well, there was a heater and we took it off. There was a heater, we took off. Every single piece of this helicopter had a heater on it because Russia is really, really cold. Yeah. That, you know, the only reason why the Volkswagen Bug is air cooled is that's the only way it would have made it to Moscow if it didn't have radiator fluid.
So this is the bare facts. On October 7th, an indeterminate number of Hamas soldiers, fighters, whatever you want to call them, invaded Israel. Not just settlers or whatever. They went into Israel itself. They killed and took hostage some number of people, at least in the hundreds, maybe up to 1,000 people killed and 100 plus taken hostage. There were aspects of this that were like, I mean, like entertaining from the outsider's perspective. Like, for example, Hamas used paragliders, which is like those you've seen. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen them before. You sit in like a little chair that has a big propeller fan on the back of it, and it uses you're held up by a parachute and you fly around. That people do it here all the time from the mountains, right? You see them people flying around in the summer all the time. Well, they loaded up 2 guys, gave them like an RPK, and used them as airborne troops. I don't think it was like very effective, and it wasn't very many of them, but just doing that was really funny. Kino, whatever you want to call it.
Because it's ghetto.
Yeah, but I mean, ghetto in a way that like it sounds like something that they would have tried in World War II. You know, like gliders were ghetto.
Well, I mean, it's just funny because in here it's a beach thing. Like it's something you do on the beach, right? Like that's just like they're like a recreational thing. Those things only go like 30, 35 miles an hour or something like that.
None of them like were in military colors and stuff. They were all like bright red and all that kind of thing.
Which I mean, that's a good idea if you're doing like a sneak guerrilla attack. Yeah, you want to be the rainbow colored. And
well, I mean, the people at the rave that they flew into probably just thought it was part of the thing. You know what I mean?
I looked at that video closer. There's a video from the rave somebody took of people purporting that it was the paragliders. And like would be too good of a story to be true. Like you could see them coming in. Like that would be too Hollywood. And it was. What they're actually looking at are the trails from rocket attacks. But it's like those videos are showing people at this music festival moments before they get hit by rockets and attacked by like Hamas guys in trucks and like technicals and stuff. That's like another thing we should explain what we're talking about. There was a music festival being held that had like 3,000 people, and it was near the Gaza fence border. Ironically, it was like a peace festival for the people of Gaza or whatever, where a bunch of rich Israeli lib people, or a lot of young people just came for music, but it was to benefit the people of Gaza. And Hamas, either by design or by pure happenstance, came through in the middle of this music festival, and they're saying they killed like 200 people there alone. That like 200 of the 1,000 people were killed there, and an unknown number of people taken hostage. If you saw videos of bloody, like, that's another thing we'll have to get to. Pieces of bloody women being shot or kidnapped, it was probably women from that festival, because everybody had a cell phone. There were a lot of non-combatants in this one place getting shot at and shelled and bombed by rockets.
Yeah, there's a part of the story that I don't know if we'll have time to get into. And it's partly ironic because, like, sort of, I always talk about this online all the time. I'm a relic from another age, and women in the military bother me. Although, I mean, there's
Bog Beef, you're the youngest one on this podcast.
Right.
Not by much, but yeah.
Which, by the way, I mean, in more than one ways, I'm a relic. Like, women were used in World War II by, like, everybody would have used them in all kinds of different roles and stuff. And if they weren't going to use them, they would have put them in factories, and I would bitch about women taking our factory jobs too. So, I mean, obviously I'm out there on this. However, like there's like an actual legitimate theorist guy that also holds this view. It's not just some, like, Alex Jones or something. There's this like esteemed military theorist who thinks that women should be in militaries, like in general, blah, blah, blah. And he's Israeli. He like the guy, if you got a conference about women being in the military, they bring out this one guy. He's Israeli. He thinks now, I mean, in my opinion, I mean, this is kind of, I went to school with a lot of people that would been in IDF, and I'll tell you this. First off, I mean, some of those beautiful women I've ever seen in my entire life.
Here comes the spin.
I mean, we had this speech class with it, and there was a bunch of them in there. And this girl, her speech was on her yoga practice. And she sat up front and gave this yoga exhibition that I will never forget. Not one, my brain will never. If you wonder why I can't remember people's names, well, that space has been reserved for certain events in 4K HD. My God. But
yeah, they did studies about this in the United States, and even academics in like the whatever 70s, whenever they were discussing this, they were by their time periods very liberal. Even a lot of them came to like scientifically, if you can call social science a science, which you can't. Sorry, illegitimate scholar. They came to the conclusion that it probably would be bad to have women involved in combat because just rather the effect that it had on the men who were serving alongside them. It's right. It's very bad for morale to see a woman getting shot up.
Maybe, but here's the alternative perspective, and this is what the military does. So one thing you'll notice, one of my favorite gun forums, not going to talk about guns, has a thread. One of the most popular thread on the forum is pictures of chicks in the military. And you know what? There's a lot of them that are hot, way hotter than just like the average stuff that you see. You ever look at pictures of female cops? Anytime a female cop does something arsler in the news, which is not uncommon, there's like a better than normal chance she's going to be good looking. Why is that? Well, I mean, in my opinion, this is why Israel does. So in the U.S. military, this is different. In the U.S. military, there's 5 buck-toothed chicks on every Navy ship, and every sailor is fighting over them. That doesn't produce this effect. So I'm not talking about that. They don't have to look like anything in the U.S. military because there's not very many of them, and people just sort of adjust the numbers. What Israel does, in my opinion, is the reason why they make all the boys and all the girls join the military is because when they're at the age of people looking the best, we reviewed that earlier in the show that you looked better when you were 18 than you do now. But the reason why women look good in the military, reason why female cops look good, is because they get paid to not be fat. That's it. That's the reason. If the average chick you saw working at McDonald's was paid to not be fat, you'd be like, damn, these McDonald's chicks be looking good.
Well, they also have mandatory service, so even the hottest woman in America is not going to join the military ever. That's not going to happen. There'd be no reason for it to. The hottest woman in Israel almost certainly will. She'll either do that or do their social work.
Here's what the point. It's a dating. This is how they get people married. They put all the boys and all the girls into the military when they're 18 to 24 and they're hot and horny, and they make them work out and they get married. That's why Israel does it. I mean, that's my opinion. Maybe that's an estimation.
Okay, I like that. That's a nice hot take.
Yeah, we should do my other hot take. But anyways, all right.
Well, let's talk. There's something about this I want to talk about too, because there were a lot of videos going around. Not only these women, there was one video of Hamas. They had the corpse of one of these women from the music show, and she's half naked, whatever, she might have been half naked at the music show, and they're driving her around through the Gaza Strip, and people are running out and celebrating and hitting her with sticks and excited. They're jumping around. It was kind of like, in the South, when you shoot a buck, you put it on the back of your truck and take your picture with it, right? Like, they were doing that, but with a human woman. And people got, obviously people felt a certain way about that. I made a tweet about it, and it's one of the few times I had to just mute the tweet and not look at any of the replies because a conservative influencer retweeted it, and I got a billion angry responses to it, or what seemed like a billion. But anyway, my point was, here I'll say it verbatim and explain. All these HD videos of men dragging bleeding and crying women away from a first world country is going to get attention. It's different than these ISIS videos that we saw in the past, where yeah, there were women who were taken, like Yazidi women taken as sex slaves and stuff, but that happened in the Middle East and in a place where Western people just said like, yeah, well, that's what happens there. It's not safe to live in Iraq. It's not safe to live there. They live in a culture where these things happen. These Israeli women who were getting picked up and their dead bodies dragged around,
that was a German chick.
yeah, she was Israeli. I don't think she's Israeli/German, but she's like a German national. She had a German passport. These are people, now I said, with a sleeve tat or whatever. Like, they're people who you recognize and like, wow, that could be me. That could be my sister, whatever. That got people's almonds activated big time. And there were also videos of IDF's women soldiers who were captured by Hamas, and they were dragging them around bloodied. And these things brought out emotions in people. And it was interesting because in our little sphere of Twitter, there are people who, like, part of their identity and their politics and their philosophy is that, like, we need to return to a period of time where this was how everybody behaved all the time. Like there is nothing more classical antiquity than you going across the border and killing a bunch of men and taking a bunch of women hostage and carting them back to your territory.
This was always the theory on why there's so many beautiful women in the Swedish bikini team. There's so many beautiful women in the Nordic countries is that these Vikings would go around and bonking women in the head with a club and dragging them back to Oslo on their Viking raids.
Any way you look at it, this is how human beings conducted warfare in the past, and in the present too, in some places.
This has gone on the scale of hundreds, thousands of people. At least, sorry, I'll keep going.
I didn't see any, maybe there were and I missed them. I didn't see any of the people who said this stuff before about how, like, we need to return and we need to do this and that and we need to revitalize ourselves, but none of them were celebrating what was happening there. In fact, most of them were pretty angry at Hamas for doing this thing. Which I think, can we put a nail in the coffin of like that as a serious idea? It's like, it's a meme, right? Well, nobody really, obviously those people don't really believe that crap.
I'm going to take a different path on this. Well, I'm going to say a couple things. Okay, so first off, this matters how old you are. So if you're 18 to 25, this subject sounds different to you. There's a lot of things sound different. If you're a male and you're 18 to 25, there's a lot of things that are different. So here's an example. Like, the idea of dying doesn't make sense when you're 18-year-old male. That doesn't mean anything. Yeah. I've told you a lot of stupid things I did. Now I'd be like, wow, that's really like, now once you get old, you're like, damn, that's going to cost me $800 if I got to go to the hospital. You know what I'm saying?
I remember being a teenager and we climbed up onto a 12-foot building and just jumped off of it over and over again for fun. You look at that now and you're like, man, I'm going to twist my ankle and it's going to hurt me for like 6 weeks.
Right. You're an 18-year-old male. You would detonate a nuclear bomb in downtown Tokyo for, for a BJ. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. So that's there. There is a lot of what you're talking about. There's a lot of people sort of thinking about things. Here's where I get nuanced. Number one, I have joked about in the past on this show. So you can go find very easily many ads, not an ad, but like, informational signs that were put up in many GI's barracks in World War II. World War II, the greatest generation. Beat the Nazis, saved the Jews, did it all. Storm Normandy Beach, put the flag up at Iwo Jima. Those guys, they had posters in their barracks telling them, make sure you wear a prophylactic when you bang out some chick in France or in West Germany, which you're thinking, well, I mean, so maybe they just hooked up with some hot chick. Okay, you got to realize, remember, the GIs are in charge of like who gets water and food and stuff like that. I mean, that gets really dicey really fast. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a lot of it's and by the way, these weren't like 35-year-old accountants. These were 19-year-old farm boys that have never had anything never had a piece of nothing in the world. And then they're over there and they're in charge of the food and the water. And well, the military is like, you better give these boys condoms. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot. Here's what I'm going to tell you. First off, this is like probably, I don't think this is going to be out of war. And I mean, so I don't want it to dwell on it too much, but I mean, this has always been practically a huge part of war. You ever think one of these questions that comes up is like, why didn't Hannibal just go take Rome? He should have just clicked the button on his mouse and said, move army to Rome, cap Rome, war's over. You win. You know why? Because those guys were too busy raping and stealing everything they could after they got a couple of victories around their belt. Okay. I mean, that's after you would have these big wins, you would have to let these guys do it. When you only the generals with like the absolute most control of their army was able to like put like legitimate pause on the stealing and raping for long periods of time. Am I wrong?
Sure.
This is what happens when you got guys, they're the army, they're the temporary rulers, and this is what's going on.
Well, that gets into confusing territory, because if you're talking about like Hannibal and you're talking about that period of time, the point of being in the army, if you're in Hannibal's army, the reason that you're there is because you're going to get to rob, steal, and rape when you capture a city. That's the whole point for you as a soldier. And he's not going to restrain you from doing it. The only problem for him is if you let that get in the way. Like if you're looting the baggage train and the enemy army gets away, that's his problem for you. Otherwise, it's not. Whereas you might not necessarily, if it's 1945 and you're not in a red army, but you're in like the American army, you might not want your troops to do that, because you have political considerations and diplomatic considerations. But Hannibal's men didn't have that. That was just a nut that was too, like you said, nut too tough to crack in Rome, you know? It's different.
Right. Far across the blue waters lives an old German's daughter by the banks of the old river Rhine, where I loved her and left her, but I can't forget her. I miss my pretty Fraulein. I don't think Fraulein spoke English. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just kind of a reality check that's going on. Here's something they don't tell you because, like, I mean, it gets kind of weird really fast. You ever play a World War II game? Germany beats France. They did the Battle of France, and the Ghost Division raged across France. France is beaten in military rule. They're beaten. Here's what they don't tell you. All those French chicks started banging the Nazis. They started banging the Nazis. It happened like crazy. Coco Chanel was banging them two at a time. It's a complicated thing. It happens in war. Part of it because, once again, the basic unit in war is the aforementioned 18 to 25-year-old male who doesn't understand things like, they have it's a very certain type of person. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I don't know how much we can you want to take a pause and come back to that so we can hit a couple important stories.
Okay, sure.
Okay, let's start off. I don't know if you have it, but this is I'm gonna go find it off of your Twitter. One of the best stories, which by the way we already covered. We should do real quick. So we already covered it, so we don't really have to do it. But can you hit the button real quick?
Yeah.
Okay. This on 19th of September 2023, Azerbaijan launched a military offensive on Nagorno-Karabakh. One day after the offensive started on the 20th of September, that's like 2 weeks ago. Almost exactly, no, 1, 2, 3. Almost exactly 3 weeks ago. One day after the offensive started on 20th September, by the way, remember, launched a military offensive. They didn't write a poem or something like that. They had guys with young 18 to 25-year-old males go in with guns. An agreement on establishing a complete cessation of hostilities in Nagorno-Karabakh was reached at the mediation of the Russian Peacekeeping Command in Nagorno-Karabakh. Azerbaijan held meeting representatives of the Artsakh Armenian community on the 21st September in Yevlak to start the process of reintegrating the nation to Azerbaijan. In the aftermath of the offensive, so basically here's what they went in. All the Armenians are out. Armenia is going to take them back. And all like, I don't know how long they've been there, but there's some pretty old ass buildings there that are Armenian. But so Armenia is like, we're done on January 1st. This area is no longer has anything to do with Armenians. This is now Azerbaijan. It's over.
Correct.
Okay. We already talked about it a little bit. I just wanted to cover that. I mean, that is this or that ethnic cleansing? That's ethnic cleansing. That's ethnic cleansing. They're out. They're gone. They ain't coming back. It's over. There you go. Okay, let's keep moving. Happy story next. Okay, this is wonderful. God, where is it? It's on yours. Okay, so I can start out with a story. I know it by heart. Okay, so the story begins. There was this, somewhere in Africa, small politics. It doesn't really matter because it's not the president or something. It's just some small district in Africa.
I know what you're talking about now.
There's a news story that comes out and said there was a politician that lost an election, and while they were the mayor or something like that, while they were in charge of this area, they donated out of their own money enough money to buy this district a ambulance. So the ambulance was awesome. District added it to the district, and later on they lost an election. They went and repossessed their ambulance. They took it back.
Yeah, Evelyn Anite, I guess is how you pronounce it. She was in Uganda, and I guess I don't know, she's a minister, part of parliament, or something smaller than that. Probably something smaller than that. She donated an ambulance. They have a picture of the ambulance, and in the picture of the ambulance is wonderful because it says ambulance on it. I'll throw the picture up here for people to see, but I'll describe it for the listeners too. It says ambulance, like an ambulance is supposed to, but then below it has her name in giant block letters and a picture of her smiling face on the side of the ambulance. It's like, by the way, it was the Honorable Evelyn Anite, MP for Nakanisi, that hauled your sorry ass to the hospital. And don't you forget it. And they did forget it, and they voted her out, and she took it back. But the best part was that I guess either her or her social media person said that when they complained about it, she said, someone said this is fake news. She would never do something like that. She's a good person. Here's what she said, and I quote, "My dear, I actually did it, and I am very proud of my action. Once they said go away, I packed all my belongings and left them. Now I hear people crying as if I were the first one to call it quits. The Bible says the wages of sin is death.
It's perfect. By the way,
Based.
putting your name and face all over the thing you did for the people who elected you, that is a huge part of patronage. You should always do that. You don't just assume people heard you. There's a lot of S in the news. People don't catch everything they hear. You have to scream at the top of your lungs, I did this for you. I did this for you. Now, the public votes her out. So what'd she do? And then she responded. They said, well, why did you do that? She said, well, here's the deal. I'm a nice person, but voters have to be nice to me back. That's the deal. Perfect response. I don't know if she'll win the next election or whatever, but you can lose election and not, for bullshit reasons or whatever. But I mean, this is someone that understands politics.
Yes, like Olive Oil here said, Donald Trump signed his name on those checks he sent out to us.
Exactly. You do, and they don't do back. You take it back. You go away. That's perfect. Yeah. It's, that was a really great story, really classic, perfect. A part of it, we live in the West where, we have built up all this years and years of bullshit and journalists. So it's hard to get straight answers out of people. You have politicians that don't really have a duty, it's gotten to the point where people can get elected and not do anything for you. This is why, people are like, this Donald Trump is going to, he's going to become Caesar or emperor or something. Why was there's this huge, crazy outpour? Because there's people that never had a politician do S for them, never do nothing for them. And you just awake something in them when you do. It don't have to be a lot.
I want to go back to the main issue at hand right now, because here's the only part of the Israeli-Palestinian fight that really I care about, and that is, how is this going to affect me as an American? And I'm not joking when I say that. This is how you should view, I think, how you should view politics. It's weird if you don't. Like, you don't need to know about what's happening in Armenia if you're not Armenian, your grandma's not there. You don't really need to know, you wouldn't need to know what was going on in Israel and Palestine if it was not, unfortunately, a huge political issue in our country and always has been.
Yeah.
Agree?
Yeah. Make sure, look at Joshua Ham's message. We're going to come back to that.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. Ukraine is out. Israel is in. Zelensky's yesterday's news. They're going to want to send all the money to Israel. They're focusing all the attention on Israel. The Republicans are using this as a way to attack Joe Biden for screwing up and not, whatever, for giving Iran money and this and that. And as we mentioned before, this is an outlet for American politicians to do a little bit of nationalism as a treat. But of course, it's not American nationalism, it's Israeli nationalism. And, you and I on this podcast a lot, we talk up evangelical Christians because that's our upbringing. But this is one where we got to take a huge L, because part of why regular people, like, let me step back. Normie people that I talk to every day were not super invested in the Ukraine and Russia. There were people when it first started like, oh, that's terrible what's happening over there, but it wasn't a thing that they cared about. Oh, they're invested in this. Everybody here is talking about Israel and Palestine, and like they're getting their blood up. They're acting like these people attacked Miami or something. And I know why this is. Like, I specifically saw it happen this Sunday here. It's because a lot of these evangelical ministers go into the pulpit and simp for the state of Israel. Hard. Really hard. In a way that they would never do for any other country. And to me, this is a unmistakable a mistake, a big flaw in our religious denomination.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a big thing. There's a theological tie there, right, Merrick? Too, like
Yes.
some of
there's
them
more.
tie this to like end of days stuff.
There's two things going on. So there's some Bible verse that says, if you bless Israel, you'll be blessed.
Yeah.
And there's the other thing, which is basically, if you want to start the end of the world,
You
need
rebuild the temple.
they have to rebuild the temple. Well, I mean, do we? They have to. You have to. You got to get the red. You need a red calf, red heifer, and then you got to rebuild the temple. Which I mean, well,
Emperor Julian tried to rebuild the temple and it was struck by lightning.
it wasn't
'Cause
time yet.
Emperor Julian was famously an apostate. He was a pagan after the Roman Empire had been Christianized, or at least the leadership had been Christianized for like a generation, and he was like the pagan cell edgelord, and he paid to have the temple rebuilt just to like stick it to his Christian relatives, and he got struck by lightning.
He actually, see, what's funny about that though is he wasn't a pagan cell edgelord. He was a trad, actually, like in their society. You know what I'm saying? Like he was like his whole thing was he was trying the religious aspect was, we shouldn't go too far down this rabbit hole, but it was like just one aspect of trying to restore traditional Roman institutions. You know what I mean? It would be like what he was doing was actually the equivalent if a politician came in today and as part of like their symbolism in trying to restore American institutions made everything close on Sundays, right? Like old school blue law stuff. That's what he was doing.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways. So, I mean, well, I don't ever see these people want to attach like riders to money. Like, hey, we won't give you this money unless you would start building the temple, which there's a problem with that. Where the temple has to be rebuilt is right now this other thing called the Dome of the Rock.
Yeah, because have we ever talked about this and just that was a thing that just these two would be nice about saying these two sects of people, like they would capture the Hagia Sophia and just like put a coat of paint on it and say it's something new.
Well, now, like every single holy site, everybody claims.
Yeah.
So like where the temple goes is would be the most if it got rebuilt, it'd be the most important thing. Well, I mean, so that's the Wailing Wall is there. That's the most important place in the Jewish religion, I think. Of course it is. The Muslims say the Dome of the Rock is the most important thing. I don't know if it's more important than what's the big meteor thing?
I don't. Will they go do the Hajj? I don't know what that thing is.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. And then the Christians are, well, that's where if the temple gets rebuilt, Jesus comes back, end of days, blah blah blah. So I don't know. Well, I mean, here's the deal.
The end result of this is that you have people who are like MAGA, like rednecks, like I know, who are just ride or die for the modern state of Israel, which I don't think that's a good outcome for anybody, because I'm guessing that's not what they meant in the book, for one thing. But another thing, it leads us to doing things that we shouldn't do. And these are people who naturally should be against this, the way they are not really, they're against giving money to the Ukraine now. But they're for giving it to Israel, and we're going to go through these whole shenanigans all over again. It's very tiresome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, does it matter? I mean, do you think the United States, like, how long, like, show me a timeline where the USA doesn't back Israel?
Yeah, and you're right, and it doesn't matter. And like, there's been many times that the public opinion has been isolationist, and it never matters at all. It doesn't matter what regular people think at all. They're going to do what they're going to do. They were against public was against getting in World War I. They were against getting in World War II. They were against Vietnam at first. they'll always just do what they're going to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, all right, you're right, but also since Vietnam, that system has been breaking down. Their ability to do that has been reduced. For the first big example being Vietnam, right? Like we pulled out in large part because the public had just like had enough of it. And then, we saw public opinion eventually turn against Afghanistan. We saw it turn against the Iraq War. Like, that didn't happen after World War II, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like this is a newer thing that is like, I don't know if this is like a white pill or if I'm being overly optimistic or whatever, but more and more over time, we've actually seen the sort of elite ability to do that is less and less effective, it seems, each go around, starting with Vietnam.
Well, here. I mean, there's a certain gentleman that we have on our show all the time that's been saying that, and it'll be more of the case. It's hard to look at the world and say that the United States has the same handle on the reins as that it's had for since. I mean, I would probably put the point. We were talking about this earlier, the last couple episodes, about when would you put the date of the most United States power? I thought of a new good one. Here's one. All the days where we had the bomb and nobody else had it. That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, 1946 might be one of the higher points. Yeah.
When did someone else get a bomb?
The Russians got it. In I think 49 or something like that. 47.
Damn.
I mean, they got it from us. It's not
yeah, and I don't even think that was the height of the power. The height of the power was us rebuilding Europe and Japan in our own image, right? So, like, I think that the Marshall Plan stuff, the 50s was really the height of U.S. power.
Yeah. By the way, I was reading stuff about this. I was wrong. So one of the things I always thought that Germany had no chance for a bomb because where were they going to get all that plutonium? I was corrected on Twitter. Apparently they had plenty of it.
Their problem was that they were trying to use heavy water instead of using graphite. That was if you go by the the scholarship on, like, basically they were doing it the wrong way.
Right. Germans are smart, but they weren't. They took the wrong way on that. Okay.
But
Pablo. Oh yeah. Sorry. We have to go back. We have to go back to Joshua's.
I just want to throw this out here because it was a big story with the Oppenheimer movie and stuff. Like, it wasn't the genius like that we were like America had like special geniuses, because we did it, but we did have a lot of geniuses and a lot of people came here who were geniuses.
How dare you?
But what it was is that we created a huge factory, and it had a budget that was unheard of. It was like billions of dollars, $1 billion in the time when like $1 billion meant something. And we focused all that on this one project. Nobody else in the world could do that. They didn't have the capacity to do that. They didn't have the industry or the resources. That's how we got the bomb before everybody else. That's the real answer. Even if Germany had been doing the bomb research correctly, they probably didn't have the means to
the centrifuges.
They didn't have a means to make the bomb, and they didn't have the means to make enough of the bombs to do what we did, which was like saying holding the world hostage would be going a bit too far. But holding Europe hostage, saying to the Red Army, you don't come any further than this, or we're gonna incinerate all of your cities. Nobody else could have done that. Even the USSR couldn't really do that. They pretended to do it in the 50s, but they didn't even have the means then. It was our ability to make these things that did that, and that ability is gone now. And if you take people sometimes complain about Malcolm's doomer takes, like he's on the show and stuff, and should we say this or that? If you take one thing away from Malcolm when you hear him on here, it should be that the ability, like the industrial capacity, capability, whatever you want to call it, of the United States is what made it the United States. And once that disappeared, it's not the same country anymore, and we're just now kind of dealing with the distance between that reputation and the reality of today. And people can argue whether it's really far or it's really short, if we're still super powerful or if we're just a paper tiger. Nobody really knows. That's the true answer. Anyway,
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah, that's the thing that Tinkster's been talking about that with in respect of like, well, is America going to back Israel or are we going to back Ukraine? Well, with what? And they're like, well, what is it? We have infinite money. Well, they don't need money. They need artillery shells and bombs and shit. And you can't print those.
Well,
We don't have a political situation that allows us to create them at a high rate.
If there's one good news for the GAE, it's that the Ukraine and Israel need two different things. The Ukraine needs a buttload of artillery shells and tanks. The Israelis need bombs. They need guided munitions, and that'll push back the date to the point where we're out of ammo later than it would have been otherwise. Like, they don't need the exact same thing. If they needed the exact same thing, this would probably become a problem tomorrow. Because I've heard that supposedly, and Hamas themselves said this, they said that Israel sent like a huge portion of their military equipment and their shells and ammunition to the Ukraine at the behest of the United States government. And that's why Hamas knows that they can wait them out. Who knows if that's true or not, but it would be pretty funny if it was.
Yeah. They'll have to put pictures of Zelensky up in the mosque. Joshua Ham, though, this is actually important. Josh says, by the way, went out and door knocked for mayoral candidate today. Afterwards, we talked about potential administration jobs after election. It feels so weird to ask for patronage, but it's necessary. Yes, squeaky wheel gets the grease. This is more him. He may not know I'm willing to be his hatchet man if I don't tell him. If he finds a place, I'll be as strong as soldier and find more people because personnel is policy. Yes, 1,000 times yes. That's perfect. You have to be very direct about this stuff. Because we just live in a crazy world and people just do stuff. You have to be very direct, very clear communication. Hey, I will do this for you. You got to do something for me. That's perfectly awesome. That's how things work. Good luck. Yes. Manufacturing issues big. I'm surprised Peter Zehan isn't more alarmist about the end. Again, he's kind of regime shield. Yeah, I mean,
isn't he explicitly paid to do that? To be a regime? Like, isn't that his job?
I don't know. I mean, so he would definitely there's people now like nobody listens to like David Brooks or something like that. You know what I mean? David Brooks writes about all this kind of crap, but he's sort of like he's gone. He's sort of graduated. They sort of spill their beans and no one cares about them. They have to cycle you out. They always do this. They got to bring in the new guys. Zehan, I mean, he definitely would have no credibility if he only said things that run true. So he has some room to play around. He plays around a little bit. I don't really know what his deal is. I know that he was, he certainly doesn't have a crystal ball. I mean, he was the last time I checked in on him was during the whole, right before, I checked in on him like, right when the coup was going to happen. The guy, the bald guy was going to, the
Erdogan?
No, Przynski or
yeah. With the Wagner guy, yeah.
The Wagner guy
or whatever
was going to start a coup and take over Russia, and that was game over. He got very excited about that. And then like 4 hours later, he posted a thing where he said, yeah, maybe I got a little excited about that. The other thing is they just keep saying, well, China doesn't really have legs. China's going to fall apart. China has all these problems. Okay. I mean, I keep hearing this shit, but it's like, well, are the factories going to go away? I mean, there's a timeline where that could happen, but they have to be built somewhere else and stuff.
Right. I mean, that's another one of those things where you take something that's true, but you put a spin on it to take it further than it's meant to go. Like the thing, I get into this with Malcolm and you to a lesser extent. I'm also one of those China skeptical people, but not that I'm saying that they're not going to become a mega superpower or that they won't have a bigger GDP or a bigger army or be able to have massive influence. I just don't think they're going to conquer. I don't think they're going to conquer the world. I don't think they're going to do that. That's where it's going to break down. They're going to run into the same problems that we have, and I don't know. They have some underlying issues that pretty much historically it stops them from becoming a world power, but it also stops them from losing what makes them China. Like the way that we lost what made us America in the past. Like that's I think that's a reasonable position. The thing where they're going to collapse tomorrow, a lot of that's wishful thinking, and partially because we fed them. We got mauled by the pit bull that we fed. We didn't have to do that. We didn't have to send our manufacturing over there. That was a conscious decision made by people under false pretenses.
Well,
Or maybe they thought they bought into the hype. Maybe they were on the MMT train and thought it didn't matter, but they made a conscious decision to do that.
okay. Do you think who's the guy that wrote 5 Billion Americans?
Matt Iglesias.
Do you think Matt Iglesias wants those jobs here or over there?
Yeah, he wants them over there.
He wants them over there. So I mean, there's a lot of people like that. And by the way, I mean, pretty soon, like there will come a point. I mean, maybe it won't happen. By the way, we have to throw out these. There's a lot of these sort of liberal opinions where we thought the world worked a certain way. Well, we thought that once a country got a bunch of money going and stuff, that the people would rise up for middle class life and all this kind of stuff. Which, by the way, I mean, if that happened over there, well, then they would just, Fredo reliably informed me, they would just move the factories to like Vietnam and all these other places, right?
Yeah.
That already is happening there, and they already are doing that. like that's already in swing. Like, that's been at least for 5 years now. The situation has been like, basically the Chinese people are demanding higher wages. The government is like authoritarian, but there's only so much they can really do about that, right? Like they crack down. Striking is illegal there because like the government runs the union. So effectively like all strikes are wildcat strikes. So the government cracks down on those, but that doesn't mean they're not effective, right? But as a result, yeah, for a while now, stuff has been moving to even lower cost countries than China. China's getting too expensive.
Not everything has to be a strike. I mean, we talked about before. We heard this story for a long time that so if you've worked in offices at any point, you've probably worked somewhere that ran on an IBM mainframe. It's this type of computer that isn't used very often, but they are used. Toyota, from what I understand, all their stuff still runs on IBM mainframe. They're really, really good at a certain kind of computing. However, the only people that can sort of maintain them are these boomer guys from back when they were popular. And, we were told that all these guys would be replaced by like Indians and kids would go to night school and figure out how to do this. Well, they didn't. I know of 2 of them. Both of them don't want to work anymore, but people keep throwing so much money at them to keep working. They don't even really need any more money. And these guys, I've told the story before. I worked at a place that was hiring one. They could only get one to come to a interview, and he wouldn't come to an interview. He did the interview on his webcam, and he had just woke up. It was like 10:30. He didn't have a shirt on. And he was sitting there eating McDonald's big breakfast the entire time.
I've heard this story so many times, but I didn't hear the big breakfast part. I didn't remember that.
I didn't really emphasize it. Is that he was sloppy. He didn't give a F. And like, that was how he appeared for the interview. I'm like, is that a strike? It's not a strike, but he's telling you something.
If you eat a McDonald's big breakfast either A, you're hungover, B, you don't care anymore, or C, you're down bad for whatever reason. Like
Well,
that's
I don't know, dude. If you don't get the hotcakes, that's the most healthy thing on. That's like probably the healthiest thing you can eat at McDonald's, isn't it?
I that's not my point. that ain't even the point.
You're still gonna have a bad time on the commode.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of which, here's some hot news. So I love these Dagoth Irv channels, right, Nervar?
Yes, and the intoxicating innocence of it all. Yes.
There's this. I thought about doing some kind of intro for the show with one of these because apparently there's two things that happen. So number one, Dagoth and you don't have to play the video game at all. I mean, he's like at the end of like one of the hardest and most bizarre video games of all time, and he's just the most interesting character in the world. So first off, like he's like an extremely honorable guy, and he's a huge racist, but like in the most classic sense, like he will say, so first off, he's for his own race, which is the Dunmar, like all the way, right? So I mean, he will tell you all, like he doesn't care. I mean, they're the best. However, he'll be like, oh, the Nord, which is basically like a Scandinavian, he likes them to be like they are, the best they are. Like he said, like, oh, this guy is a strong, honest warrior. I like that in a Nord.
Yeah, and if you're a cat person, you should be shoplifting and getting high on skooma. That's just you need to be the best cat person that you can be.
Well, he calls them farm tools.
You're shitting me.
No, they're just farm equipment. That's all they are.
Okay, so yeah, whoever wrote that had to know what they were doing.
Right. So he's like this giant racist. But he's like super honorable. He's super honorable, right? So he's sort of, there are other bad guys in the game. He finds them distasteful because they're just like they just want to steal things and stuff like that. He wants to kick the Empire out of the Dark Elf land. That's his game plan. But anyway, so this is like, so he's just so awesome. We saw this a little bit. I've heard they've introduced this character recently in the Star Wars TV shows or whatever, but there was some of this in the blue guy in the Star Wars novels. I don't know if
he was Thrawn, right?
Thrawn.
I played he was in TIE Fighter, remember?
Right. And you're like, whoa, he's the enemy, but he's honorable. This is kind of cool. And this doesn't really diminish my mission. I don't have to have the bad guy in the game to just be like a powerful or, trash eating junkie or somebody that's like, well, I like bad things. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. But here's the thing. So it's so good. It's so interesting. And, because of that, now there is this huge competition because there's two things. Number one, his voice is amazing. I thought it had to be a black guy. I thought there was some black guy walking around sound like Dagoth but it's apparently a white guy that did this voice.
I don't get how you thought that. It didn't sound that. It didn't sound like a brother voice to me.
White guys usually, I mean, when you hear like, Barry White or something,
it's got a different timbre. It's not the same.
All right. So anyways,
like the guy from the Allstate commercials, the guy that was in Major League.
Right. Yeah. You got to smoke a lot of cigarettes. You're a white guy to get the really deep voice.
I just want to say, several minutes ago, you guys started saying words that were not recognizable English to me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Fredo. This is gamer talk.
So there's this
I figured, yeah.
So there's this fictional character that's caught on, and he's so popular. Now I'm spoiled for choice. When you go on to YouTube, there's two things. So first off, AI does his voice really well. Second off, AI writes for him really well. And it's just a peculiar POV. Once again, like an honorable racist and stuff like that. And so AI writes in that voice really well. So there is like, I just saw a new one pop up. It's called Dagoth Slur instead of Dagother because he's a big racist. And they do the same thing. There's a bunch of competing guys that they got an AI program going on, and they have the AI write Dagother content, and then they post Dagoth, then they run it through the voice sampler, and then they just post that online. They got a Patreon going, and like it's a business model that's like it's popping up like the e-cig places popping up everywhere. Now there's all these Dagother Twitter channels. I mean YouTube channels.
Well, what I think the trick to this is like, yeah, you can make an AI do certain voices. They're better than easier to mimic than others, but the dialogue is the important part, and he is easier for robots to do because he speaks in like I won't say Shakespearean way, but in the way that like you would someone would talk from like an oral tale, like a Homeric tale, right? The way he talks, it's not casual. And like the other popular AI videos are garbage, which are like, here's Donald Trump and Barack Obama and Joe Biden playing Call of Duty, and it doesn't work because they're trying to make them say casual slang stuff, and because culture moves so fast and is so degenerated now that you just can't, the AI can't do that. It can't copy whatever slur slang word's going to pop up from the community tomorrow. You know, they can't figure, it doesn't know what it means to be mid. They can't do that, but they can mimic this really well written character from the past. He's like, hey, you could probably, you know, put stuff through the chat GPT to like make someone talk like Gilgamesh, right? You can probably make it do that and it would sound okay, but you couldn't make them talk like Jay-Z. It just wouldn't work.
Right. Which, by the way, I mean, so it's British. The guy who did the voice is British. However, I'm telling people, listen to the like AI put some Southern in it. Listen to how he says the word Dunmer. He doesn't. He says it in a Southern accent. It's funny that the AI is reading Southern in there a little bit. Anyways, it's very funny. It's just popping up as like a rogue industry or whatever. They got their stuff. It's really good. Anyways, it's all AI generated. The only distant right guy who, I mean, I don't know if I never thought of his voice that way. I have seen people, and people will do this. They will put like, you know, famous works of art that people have to read for school and stuff like that. Or, you know, people, there's just, you know, like Machiavelli, the Prince or whatever. People put that up in like all these various people's voices and stuff. There's a little bit of that. People do that with Sargon of Akkad. I think part of that, he's got the British accent. It's always like a little, he's got he doesn't sound like, you know, a guy lives in a council house, you know, not that British accent, the other British accent. Yeah. That's what I'm just saying. That's a feather in your cap. And people like, obviously, I mean, you know, none of us got that kind of voice. It's British people. It helps.
Yeah, they sound good. That received pronunciation just sounds good no matter what.
Yeah.
In the past, we had that with the people who did the fake mid-Atlantic accent, but I don't think we have that anymore. Other than, I don't know, maybe a certain like Northern California accent is pleasing to the ears, so that'd be what a lot of people emulate.
Yeah, I think part of it was people got stupid, and there was that. I saw a normal lib channel the other day. This stupid channel. There's this dummy channel on YouTube, and I just ran into it because there's this hot redhead chick on there. So I ended up clicking, and she reviews armor and games, and she's like, "Well, this chick's wearing a bikini body armor. That wouldn't be good, but body armor that women would really wear in the Middle Ages."
Who cares? Who cares? Why? That's not the point.
Let me break you in on a secret, baby. Women didn't wear armor in the Middle Ages. They didn't wear armor in Middle Ages. They didn't have jobs in the military in the Middle Ages. So you're the idiot. Anyways,
you saw they made a new Counter-Strike game, Counter-Strike 2, and no, people don't like it, but one of the things they added was female operators in the game. Did you see that?
mm,
Yeah, like this is a fantasy for who? I don't understand.
well, they have female operators, but they operate different.
Right, but
They go give who's the president of Hungary?
Victor Orban.
They try to give Victor Orban a hand job and find out what he's doing. You know what I'm saying? That's how female
Right, but that's
operators.
not what you're not giving out a handy to like the GIGN in Counter-Strike 2. It's a big butch woman with a ponytail who's like snap AWPing somebody in the face. That doesn't exist, and nobody, like, I don't think there's anybody who really wants that to be a thing. It's just something that like people like her get paid to add to shit that nobody cares about.
Yeah. Well, two thoughts on that. Number one, I saw some bad news about it that's good news for me as an old man who like had like a momentary like fantasy, like, oh, I'll go play Counter-Strike again. That's not gonna happen. But however, I saw the only thing I saw about as I saw some of the pros, I saw this big long post by a pro, and he said, well, this would be a great game. However, the problem with this in CS:GO is that there's too many cheaters, and we're waiting on Valve to do something. Let me tell you, buddy, you will be in the nursing home before Valve does anything about that.
That game CS:GO came out in what, 2012, something like that. It's still waiting.
Yeah, it's not gonna happen. The game's gonna be full of cheaters forever. It's because because it's so good and so exciting, and it all goes on like the edge of the. Yeah, it's not gonna happen. But however, point two is you're bringing back to. I'll tell you who's been the biggest winner out of this. Who wins. The best tweets all week about Israel Palestine have been from Shoe on Head.
Oh, really?
Who's been she's been sort of narrating the conflict like you were talking, like, the noggins were getting jogging.
Mm-hmm.
Of like, she was just sort of have been narrating what this conflict looks like from the eyes of like a hot chick that lives in a comfortable Western country. Like, just sort of the ideas that go through your head.
Yeah, like a lot of people are asking why. Yeah. I saw some of her posts about that, and when I said my thing, I got people asking me like, well, Americans were killed and there were American hostages. I guess you don't want to do anything about that. And hey, if you want to lob some cruise missiles at Hamas headquarters like Trump did, or you want to send in like Delta Force guys to go rescue those hostages, that's fine with me. That's what they're supposed to do. That's all cool, whatever. But let's be honest, nobody does that normally. You can't. I'm not falling for this horse shit where somebody's gonna. Here's an example. A guy running for president, Ron DeSantis, is going to get on TV and talk about how we got to do this and do that. No, because nobody cares half as much about our fucking border as they care about what's going on, at the Gaza border.
Right.
Well, you better be wanting to do actually do your damn job for America before we worry about that crap. And you don't want to do that. They don't care. They don't care at all. So don't give me that horse shit. I hate this. Just try to do selective enforcement of, oh, well, I guess you just must be some kind of pacifist or some kind of coward if you don't want to do that. No, that bullshit's not going to work. That ship sailed a long time ago.
Quick thing. So number one, okay, there's this like great sort of mental health heuristic they use for people that are in really bad situations. It's like if you go to the mental health hospital and you say like, I'm hooked on crack, or I want to kill myself, I have night terrors, or my wife just left me because I'm crazy. Like the main thing they refer you to is, okay, so here's your new game plan on life. You get a lot of different things, but one thing you get is that, okay, so from going here forward, to try to get yourself back into a good place, the first thing you need to do is anything that you don't have control of, you don't worry about. If it's not within your power to do something, you need to just don't worry about that. That's not your worry. There's a reason for that, because you go crazy. You know, they're talking about people going crazy. What makes you crazy and what makes you crazier is if you get concerned about things that you don't have any input on. Now, if you are in the IDF or you're, you know, Yitzhak Rabin or something, I would put the Israel-Palestine conflict at the top of your list. I'd be very concerned about it.
Yeah.
However, you know, if you just kind of like somebody that, you know, smokes $60 of weed a week and, you know, you watch cartoons, you know, you can just let this one pass.
Before we go, one thing that's been coming up about this, and maybe you two being in Florida and I don't know, maybe in different circles than me, have an opinion about this. One thing that keeps cropping up is that universities and just general like progressive politics, they support Palestine for friend enemy reasons. And this has been popping up. They you know, people marched with Palestinian flags after the Hamas attacked, and there are all these breathless, outraged comments about it. Some of them from Republicans, which you understand, but some of them are from progressive people who are, you know, members of the Jewish religion who are outraged about this and like, oh, so I guess you want to just rape and murder us too, blah, blah, blah. You know, there's two ways you can take that, and one is that this is all friend enemy politics. It doesn't really matter. They're not thinking about any principles. They've been told that Palestine is good and Israel's bad, and that's what they're going to go with, and that's true. But the other is, there was a really thing that people have really been hanging on, is this DSA statement about how, you know, colonizers and you know, struggles against colonizers are always valid, and like the more centrist libs discovering that, well, wow, if we took this to the logical conclusion, that would mean you will think it's okay for people to rape and murder me if I'm standing in your way. It's like, yeah, bro. I'm glad you got up to speed. Like the rest of the country figured that out 3 years ago. I guess that plays into this somewhat, but I don't think so. I think that this will, after the initial explosion of outrage, this is all going to blow over and they'll forget about this. And once the election rolls around, they're all going to be friends again. Does anybody disagree with that?
No, but I mean, that's okay. So Israel-Palestine stuff is always like one of the craziest times if you're like a real nationalist, because first off, you get this weird feeling because you're like, wait a minute, all you guys that looked at me like I'm, you know, got three heads for, you know, my whole life, you know exactly how I feel. Wait a minute. This is crazy. You're not so different than me after all. You understand nationalism very, very well. So there's that. There's a lot of, there's also that stuff. Like, you know, there's a lot of people, I guess, haven't really kept up with the crime beat that happens in the United States, what happens following someone being beaten and murdered and all these kinds of things. Well, yeah. I mean, they, you know, what these people are telling you in Palestine threads, you know, they could have told you 6 months if you'd worded a certain way about, you know, crime and stuff. It's just, I don't know. When Israel-Palestine pops off, you get like endless amounts of bullshit, but you also get endless amounts of like reality check time, which I love. A lot of reality checks going on.
Yeah, there are people who think that they get a G pass for the violence and you know, just general, I don't know how you would want to phrase it, that people say like resentment politics. I don't like that because like resentment's not bad in and of itself. Like it's proper to, like if someone's screwing you over, it's in a way they shouldn't be. It's not wrong to resent them, but there are a lot of people who think that they get a G pass for this because they're on the same team, but they don't.
Well, I think the issue with resentment in politics is when it warps your mind. It makes you
Yeah.
think things that aren't true are true and stuff like that. It can just mislead you straight up.
Well, I mean, basing a large portion of your behavior and your thought on resentment is bad for you in essence. Like you should like pretty much like our religion specifically tells you not to do that, and like most of the ones that we admire, like even Stoicism, whatever, you're guiding people away from those feelings because it's not good for you as a person in general. So like obviously if you build like a political coalition around this and you make it something that you take and inculcate into people for 12 years in school and then 4 more years in college, and then like you make them talk about it on social media all the time, you're gonna make like fucked up people. That's true. You shouldn't do that. That's always gonna be a bad outcome.
Yeah, you do have a right to hate people, though. I mean, resent people and stuff. I would just say last thing, in terms of reality checks, what about all you fudge packers like Rod Dreher, who were ready to throw people's lives away for posting spicy content? I'm curious what you have to say about Israel and Palestine, because suddenly you understand serious concepts, because all these guys are like, well, and that other POS, the guy that went after Worthy House, he's talking, he just started talking about, well, you shouldn't say this or that in politics because that's not a Christian thing that you would say, blah blah blah. Well, you're not talking about your mother, you're talking about politics, and politics ultimately comes down to being raped and murdered, war, death. And here is a great reality check for all you guys. That this is actually like the end game of politics. It is actually a serious business when you start talking about, well, we'll just move in 30 million people that into this place or that place. Well, I mean, how do you guys feel about you feel a certain way about Palestine? Did you feel that certain way about this many Palestinians moving to Michigan? They got a House representative.
I wish
you
I
guys
could
want to crucify anybody that's against immigration. F you.
remember there was an interview. Man, I wish I could remember who it was. It was like, I want to say it was Dave, but it probably wasn't Dave. It was somebody, they were talking to one of these guys who's he was centrist politically, and he talked about immigration being good, and he asked him about like Israel. Well, like, should Israel have open borders? And the guy goes, of course not. That would be horrible for Israeli society. And he just kind of looked at him like, well, then you see the problem here. And the guy did something rare. He just copped to it. Oh yeah, I guess I am being really hypocritical. Like, the thing is, they actually care about Israel. They care about the survival of Israel. Israel to them is more than just a place. It's not just more than just a like this Orrin McIntyre say, like a place where you keep your stuff, where you park your money and your BMW. It means something to them, and that's the difference. And I would feel very strong if this was happening in West Virginia. I'd feel really strongly about it. You would see me posting day and night about this, and we need to do something. We need to get people involved. We need to get the United Nations involved. We need to have this and that and intervention. But it's not. It's happening to people who are very far away from me and have, not very little or nothing to do with my life.
Yeah, and by the way, heard all this S before. Heard all here's one. I always like to bring this up on Twitter. I think a lot of people like Jews, but not everybody does. A lot of people feel weird about them or whatever. Well, here's one. I mean, I think everybody I know likes Greeks.
Yeah, sure.
Especially they got that bake sale with that damn baklava. That stuff is like crack. It is like crack. It is the best damn. I mean, I'll tell you right now. I probably have to say that the key lime pie is the best, but baklava, it's damn up there. There are Greeks right now that remember they have pictures of the home they grew up in, and they were ethnically cleansed out of there. Yeah. They're gone. I mean, that happened. It didn't happen 2,000 years. It happened in their lifetimes, and nobody cared. None of these people care. So I mean, this is.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's not. It's good for people to get in touch with this stuff. It's good for you to start thinking about this stuff quite again because let me tell you, history didn't end. It happens. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. Welcome to the party. Pull up a chair. By the way, any of these DSA or BLM libtards giving s about all those people that got ethnically cleansed out of not only the mainland but also when did Cyprus happen? Like in the freaking 80s?
I think 70s, 60s, something like that. Yeah.
I mean, it was. Yeah. Anyways.
All right. Before we go, anybody have any other business, Fredo?
Nope, nothing on my end.
I'm curious. You say bog beef, key lime pies on your Mount Rushmore of desserts. You say
That's correct.
And I'm not by the way, I'm not a dessert guy.
What's your favorite, Fredo?
I don't know what my favorite is, but there. By the way, it's funny Bog Beef said that because there was, I think it was just last year, there was a big fight naming the Florida state dessert between key lime pie and strawberry shortcake. I feel like I think strawberry shortcake was the one that won, though, if I recall.
Yeah.
I'm allergic to strawberries, so like for me, it's no competition. I don't know, actually. I honestly don't have a favorite dessert right off the top of my head. Like, there's stuff I like and stuff I don't like. Fiance made a cobbler for me a little while back, which is always funny for us because her favorite cobbler is strawberry, which I cannot eat. My favorite cobbler is apple, which she cannot eat because she's allergic to it. So blueberry cobbler is our compromise cobbler.
Egg custard pie is my favorite.
Yeah, I don't know. The funny one is, I always tell this, the big meme is that white women love pumpkin
spice stuff, yeah.
Yeah. My mom is straight up allergic to pumpkin. She still eats it.
Pumpkin pie is the best.
Is.
Actually, that might be my favorite now that you bring it up. Like, I can eat pumpkin pie. I can eat a whole pie. I
don't really eat desserts at all. I don't eat pecan pie. I don't eat none of that stuff. I don't like cake. I don't like none of that crap. All I like two things. I like key lime pie, and it can't be the fluffy S. It's got to be tart. It's got to be sour. It's got to be that thick sludge. I mean, just, it can't move. It's got to be a solid. It's going to be very tart. I don't want no whipped cream on there, nothing. Very tart, and baklava is just amazing.
I never had baklava until I was an adult, and I went to one of those somebody put a Mediterranean restaurant near here, and I went in there, and the lady just gave me baklava, and it was amazing. It was incredible. I see what the fuss is about.
Well, I mean, you look at it, you're like, it must take more calories to make this than it does to eat it. It's got all these layers and all this. I don't know. It's a lot more going on than other stuff.
All right. Well, we got through this without Fed posting. Congratulations to us. Good night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Have a good night, everybody.